All right, we've talked about Presto and how it works and how it can combine together data from a bunch of different data sources on your cluster, whether it's on Hive running on your Hadoop cluster or Cassandra or MongoDB or MySQL or pretty much anything else you can dream up. So it's actually come quite a long way. Let's prove to you that it's real and actually install it and use it to do something interesting. So I've already kicked off my virtual machine here for the Hortonworks sandbox. Let's go ahead and connect to it through SSH. Maria_dev, and I will super user su up to root, so I have all the access I need in order to install everything. All right, so first thing we need to do is install Presto itself. So to do that, I need to download the package, and let's find out where it is. So I'm going to open up my web browser here and navigate to prestodb.io. That is the Presto website. And from there, if you click on Docs, from here you should see under Installation, Deploying Presto. And that's where you'll find the link for the latest server tarball, they call it, the installation package for Linux. If I right-click on that and say copy link address, I can go back over here. Let's first of all make sure that I'm in my home directory and type in wget and then right-click to paste that link in, and down it comes. Now, obviously on a real installation in production, you wouldn't be installing Presto into your home directory. You'd install it someplace more permanent where other users have easy access to it. But we're just messing around here, so again, we'll just leave it in our home directory for now. It doesn't really matter that much since we're just experimenting. All right, so now that that's down, we can uncompress it. Just tar-xvf, Presto server, whatever version we got, .tar.gz. And that should expand it all into a Presto server-version number directory. Sure enough, there it is. So let's take a little tour here and see what's in there. We'll cd into that Presto server directory that we just created and see what's in there with ls. So we have all the scripts that we have for Presto in bin, all the libraries, and all the various plugins for different databases installed already. But what they don't give you is any configuration at all. So there are actually a bunch of different configuration files that are supposed to live under the etc directory here, which doesn't even exist. And it is completely up to you to create those files and populate them. Now, all the documentation for that is on this very page that we got that download link from. If you scroll down, it talks about all the different properties files you need to create, where they should be, and some documentation of what all the various settings should be. And I think it was, fairly intentional that they did not provide default templates for you, because these will all change depending on where your different servers are for all the different databases and what ports you want to run on and stuff. So by doing this by hand, it kind of forces you to think about what you're doing. But since I'm such a nice guy, I've actually gone ahead and created a bunch of properties files for you that will work with the Hadoop desktop environment out of the box. So to get that, make sure that we're still in the Presto server directory here, and type in wget http://media.sundog-soft.com/hadoop/presto-hdp-config.tgz. Okay? And that's my little present to you. Now, to install that, all we have to do is say tar.xvf presto-hdp-config.tgz, and that should create the etc directory for you with a bunch of files in it to get you started. So let's take a look inside there, and I'll give you a little brief tour of what some of the more important things are. One thing we can look at is config.properties. And you can see here we've actually set up Presto to run on the local host on port 8090. And I chose 8090 because that's another example of a port that is open throughout the VirtualBox and the Docker container that we're running within, so that I can actually connect to the web interface for Presto from outside of the virtual machine on port 8090. So that's a support that I know is exposed and open but unused. Okay. JVM.config just contains various garbage collection and Java parameters, so not much to talk about there. Log.properties just sets the log level. If you want to take a peek in that. Take a look at node.properties. Important thing here is the node ID. So again, if you're gonna be setting up a real cluster, do not use these files. Okay, you need to do this the hard way. Make sure you're thinking about what you're setting, because node.id is supposed to be a unique identifier for each machine in your cluster. And obviously, if you just copy that to every machine that you're using, they're not going to be unique. So you do need to think about these settings if you're going to be deploying this for real. And finally, let's take a peek inside the catalog subdirectory here of etc. And you can see here I've given you a hive.properties file and a jmx.properties file. And these are two database connectors that we're going to start with. So let's take a look at hive.properties. That's just telling it to connect to a thrift service on 127.0.0.1, which is where Hive runs by default on the Hortonworks sandbox environment. So this should get you started with using Presto on Hive. That's all configured for you out of the box. In a little bit, we'll actually add Cassandra to that list too and combine them together. So a little preview of things to come. All right, we're not done yet. So we have everything we need to actually run the Presto server, but what do we do once it's running? We don't actually have an interface for interacting with it. So now we need to go download and install the command line interface for Presto as well. And to do that, we can come back to the website here, and you can see that the next subsection in the documentation is command line interface. So if you go to that topic in the documentation, you'll find another download link here for the CLI, command line interface executable. Just right click on that and say copy link address, and then we can go back to our terminal. And let's see, let's make sure that we're inside the bin folder, okay, of our Presto server folder. So I should be inside home Maria dev Presto server, whatever version you're using, /bin at this point. And now I'm going to say wget space right click to download the latest command line interface package. And now we need to decompress. Well, we don't need to decompress it actually. It's already what we need. We need to rename it is what we need to do. So to do that, let's type in mv to move that file we just downloaded to a new name. We're just going to call it Presto. And now we need to make that file executable so we can run it. So to do that, we do chmod, chmod +x Presto. And that just means it's an executable command that we can now run. And that will kick off the command line interface when we launch it with the appropriate parameters. All right, so now we're finally at a point where we can launch Presto and see if it works. Let's cd back up to the top of the Presto server directory. So again, if I do a pwd, you should be seeing that you're currently inside home Maria dev Presto server, whatever version we installed. And now to start the server, all I need to do is type in bin/launcher start, just like that. And that will kick it off. As a daemon that's running in the background, it does take about a minute for that to spin up and be ready to receive requests. But after you give it a few seconds, we can actually connect to the web interface for Presto. So let's give it a try. 127.0.0.1:8090 is the port we configured Presto to run on. So let's see what's going on here. Cool. So here we have the Presto dashboard, which is pretty good looking, isn't it? You know, that's one, you know, it's sort of a trademark of actual tools that are built by big companies like Facebook. They invest a lot of time in operations because it's extremely important in these sorts of companies that your services are up and running reliably all the time. So you tend to see some pretty nice operational dashboards. I remember when I was at Amazon, we had some similar looking tools there, and I even wrote one myself at one point that had little dials of dashboards on it. It kind of looked like you were like driving a race car, but it was in fact monitoring a cluster of servers that we had running for some personalization thing. But anyway, this UI is one of my favorite things about Presto, actually. All right, so now that we have it up and running, let's actually connect to it using that command line interface. And to do that, we can just say bin/presto --server 127.0.0.1:8090, telling it what port we're running on and what server. And --catalog Hive. So we're just going to set up the command line interface to connect to our Hive database for now. And I'm assuming that you still have the ratings table in Hive from our previous exercises. If you've been following along in the course so far, you should have that in place. If you don't for some reason, you can just log into Ambari and go to the Hive view and re-import that table if you need to. We've done it a couple of times in the course already, but if you need a refresher on how to do that, just go back to the Hive lecture and remind yourself of how to do that. You just have to go to Ambari and specify the correct tab delimiter before you import that u.data file. All right, here we have a Presto prompt, so let's see what we got, huh? So just to see what we're working with, we can say, for example, show tables from default. So default being kind of the key space or user space that's our ratings table lives within in Hive. And sure enough, there's our ratings table. So let's take a look at what's in there. Select star from default.ratings. limit 10. So at this point in the command line interface, you can just type in arbitrary SQL and it should just work. That's kind of what Presto's all about, right? And there we have the top 10. Now, look what happened over here on the dashboard. That was pretty cool. So just from running that little select statement, we saw a little spike in running queries, and well, we didn't really trigger any sort of activity of note because it was such a simple operation. But if we uncheck the finished tab here, we can actually see the history of that command that we just ran. And if you want, we can actually dig into that in more depth. Oh, look, there's the show tables command as well. So very sexy interface here operationally. You can get more information about what exactly that query did and how many resources it consumed and the different stages involved and everything you could possibly want to know. So I think that's kind of awesome. All right. Let's do something more interesting there. Let's say select star from default dot ratings. Where, I don't know, rating equals 5, limit 10. So there we have a bunch of 5-star ratings. Let's count how many 5 stars ratings we have. Select, I'm just making this up as we go. Count star from default dot ratings where rating equals, well, let's do 1-star ratings. So there are 6,110 1-star ratings in that database from Hive. So that's pretty cool, huh? And also cool is while we're doing all this, this UI over here for the dashboard is chugging away. And you can see again the history of our queries there and what's going on. So I just love this thing. Cool. All right, so we can see that Presto is successfully talking to Hive, and I can execute arbitrary SQL against Hive. But, you know, that's not terribly interesting because Hive has HQL. You know, it's actually quite trivial to execute SQL-like commands against Hive as it is. So what is this really giving us? Well, you know, the power of Presto is just being able to do queries across many different databases at once. So let's do that in our next lecture. For now, though, let's quit out of this. And just to tidy things up completely, let's actually stop Presto while we're at it. bin/launcher stop. That way, if you need to go take a break or come back to this tomorrow, things will be fine. Okay, so I'll see you in the next lecture, and we'll connect Cassandra into the mix next.